No one noticed the doors open until a battered German shepherd stepped inside, clutching a child in his jaws. Every doctor froze. Then the screaming began. What this dog had done defied every rule, and saved a life no one knew was in danger. The emergency room was already buzzing when the automatic doors slid open. Nurses rushed from one bed to the next. Phones rang with urgent calls, and the scent of antiseptic hung thick in the air. It was the sort of morning when no one dared pause, not even for a heartbeat. But then something made them stop. A hush rippled across the room as every head turned toward the entrance. Framed in the doorway stood a German shepherd, his massive frame tense with purpose. His fur was strewn with dirt and something darker, blood. But it wasn't his condition that froze everyone in place. In his jaws, cradled with astonishing gentleness, hung the limp body of a little girl in a pale pink dress stained red. Her head lolled to one side, long blonde hair spilling across the dog's shoulder. For a moment, no one moved. The dog stood perfectly still, as if he understood this was the only place that could save her. His deep brown eyes scanned the faces, staring back, almost pleading for someone to help. The only sound in the room was the soft drip of water falling from his soaked fur onto the tile floor. A nurse was the first to react. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as her clipboard clattered to the floor. The sudden noise broke the spell, and at once, people surged forward. "Oh my God! Someone get a gurney!" she shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of fuck. 2 doctors rushed over, their expressions shifting from confusion to horror when they saw the child's pale face. One of them bent low, speaking in calm, practiced tones. "Easy, boy. Going to help her." The German shepherd didn't move except to adjust his hold, ensuring the girl wouldn't slip. His eyes never left the nurse's face. It was as if he knew this was her only chance, and he would trust no one until he was certain she was safe. Another nurse appeared with a gurney, hands shaking as she wheeled it closer. The dog finally lowered himself to his haunches, laying the girl down so carefully it seemed impossible he was an animal at all. Someone gasped when they saw the bruises along her arms, the crusted blood at her hairline. A doctor pressed fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. "She's alive," he whispered, though just barely. The doctors sprang into action, voices layering over each other in a practiced rhythm of urgency. "Get her vitals," one barked. "Prep trauma room 3. We need fluids. Oxygen. Move." A nurse slipped an oxygen mask over the little girl's face as her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Another nurse started in 4, her hands steady, despite the tremor in her voice. The German shepherd paced beside the gurney, whining softly each time someone touched the girl. "Someone get this dog out of here," a security guard started to say, but the nurse shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "He brought her here. Let him stay." The gurney's wheels squeaked across the tile as they raced the girl down the hall. The dog trotted beside them, his ears pinned back, nose nearly brushing her small hand. When they reached the trauma room, he stopped just outside the doorway, peering in as the team clustered around her. Machines beeped an anxious staccato. A doctor pressed on her abdomen, voice tight. "She's bleeding internally." The German Shepard let out a low, aching sound that made everyone pause. It was more than a bark. It was a plea. As the trauma team worked behind the glass doors, the rest of the ER staff gathered near the waiting area, whispering in urgent tones. No one could quite process how a dog had carried a child into the hospital all by himself. A security guard with salt and pepper hair finally spoke up, his brow furrowed. "I know that dog," he said slowly. "He was with Search and Rescue. I saw him on the news last year. He saved a family during that flood upstate." A nurse clutched her hand to her chest, her eyes going glassy. "You mean he's trained?" The guard nodded. "Trained and loyal, he must have tracked her." The dog sat outside the trauma room, pressed close to the glass as if he could will the girl back to life. His breathing was ragged from exertion, each inhale shaky. A janitor set down a dish of water, but he ignored it, his gaze locked on the small figure, surrounded by doctors. No one dared move. Every so often, he shifted to peer through a different angle of the window, making sure she was still there. And in that sterile hallway, even the busiest staff felt something tighten in their chests. Inside the trauma room, the girl's heartbeat fluttered weakly on the monitor. A surgeon leaned over her small body, voice low and urgent. "She's losing too much blood. We have to open her up." A nurse adjusted the oxygen mask and glanced at the window where the German Shepard sat, watching every movement. His eyes tracked each person who stepped close to her as if silently judging whether they could be trusted. Blood pressure dropping. Another doctor warned. The room seemed to constrict, the air growing heavier as every second slipped away. Outside, the dog pressed his nose against the glass, fogging it. With each ragged exhale, someone tried again to coax him away with a kind word and an outstretched hand, but he didn't budge. His entire world was on the other side of that door. A nurse finally brought a folded blanket and laid it beside him. Slowly, he lowered himself down, muscles trembling. He rested his head on his paws, but never looked away. The beeping on the monitor spiked and then began to slow. In that instant, everyone knew they were balanced on the edge between hope and the unthinkable. Time became something strange, both unbearably slow and terrifyingly fast. Hours slipped by while the dog lay unmoving on the blanket, his eyes fixed on the trauma room door. Nurses came and went, their shoes squeaking softly against the polished floor. Each time someone emerged from the operating room, the German Shepherd's head would lift, hope flickering across his tired face. But no one brought news. A janitor, his hands rough and stained with cleaning fluid, knelt down and gently stroked the dog's ears. "You did good, boy," he whispered, voice thick. "You did real good." Eventually, a nurse arrived with the girl's parents. The mother's face was pale, her hands trembling as she took in the sight of her daughter beyond the glass and the dog, who refused to leave her side. She fell to her knees beside him, pressing her palm against his massive shoulder. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she choked out the only words she could manage. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing her home." The dog let out a small, exhausted sigh. For the first time he closed his eyes, resting them just for a moment because he knew he wasn't alone anymore. As dawn broke through the tall windows, the trauma room door finally swung open. A doctor stepped out, her scrub stray with blood and her face drawn with exhaustion. She pulled her mask down and looked at the girl's parents, then at the dog waiting so faithfully by the door. "She's alive," the doctor said, her voice. "It was close, but she made it through surgery. She's stable for now." The mother let out a strangled cry and covered her face with both hands. The father sank to his knees, shoulders shaking, but it was the German shepherd who moved first. His ears lifted and he pushed himself up on unsteady legs as if he'd been holding his breath for hours. A nurse opened the door wider, gesturing for the parents to follow her inside. When they stepped in, the dog pressed forward, too. No one tried to stop him. In the recovery room, the little girl lay pale but breathing, and snaking across her arm. The dog walked to her side and rested his head on the edge of her blanket. Her tiny fingers twitched, brushing his fur. Even in her sleep, she knew he was there. In the days that followed, the little girl's strength slowly returned. Morning, the nurses found the German shepherd curled beside her bed, his head resting where her hand could reach it. When she finally opened her eyes, she didn't speak right away. She simply looked at him, her gaze soft and full of something no one else could understand. News crews gathered in the hallway, cameras flashing as the hospital staff shared what had happened. The story spread everywhere about the dog who had refused to give up, who had carried a child across miles to safety. People sent letters, toys, and blankets hoping to thank him in some way. Doctors agreed she would make a full recovery. Her parents stayed by her side, but it was the dog who never left, who never seemed to tire. Each time she stirred or whimpered in her sleep, he lifted his head, alert and ready to protect her. Again, on the day she was discharged, the staff lined the hallways to watch. The girl reached out a trembling hand, and the dog pressed close, steady as ever. And in that moment, everyone knew they were witnessing something rare.